In just 6 months, Florida lost over $6 billion in tourism revenue, and they did it to themselves. That's not an exaggeration. It's not even speculation. It's reality, backed by hard data, visible from the boarded-up shops on Fort Myers Beach to the for-sale signs littering once-booming Canadian-owned properties in Clearwater. This is the story of how Florida, a state built on sunshine, snowbirds, and seasonal prosperity, managed to self-destruct its own tourism economy. Not through a natural disaster, not through foreign attack, but by the hands of its own leaders. It traded economic stability for political spectacle. And the fallout? It's far worse than anyone predicted. The collapse? No one wanted to believe. For decades, Florida had one of the most reliable economic engines in North America, the Canadian snowbird. Every winter, thousands of retirees would migrate south, escape the cold, and breathe life into Florida's winter economy. These weren't tourists. They were seasonal residents, spending 6 months a year renting homes, paying property taxes, buying groceries, seeing doctors, dining out, and maintaining second homes. According to Statistics Canada, the average Canadian snowbird household spent $33,000 per winter in Florida. By contrast, the average American tourist spends about $1,200 on a short vacation. Let that sink in. To match the economic impact of one snowbird household, Florida would need to attract 28 American tourist families. That's not a small difference. That's an entirely different economy. But in just a few months, this golden goose was strangled. The warnings were clear. The warning signs weren't hidden. They were flashing like emergency sirens as early as January 2025. Winter rental bookings dropped 31%. Canadian real estate searches plummeted 45%. Flights from Canada to Florida fell by 38%. Anyone looking at those numbers could see the economic storm coming. It was immediate, it was measurable, and it was dangerous. But instead of acting, Florida's politicians brushed it off. They dismissed the Canadian market collapse as a minor dip, one that would easily be filled by domestic tourists. That decision, catastrophic. Let's be clear, this collapse didn't happen because of a market shift. It wasn't just inflation or interest rates or the Canadian dollar. It was policy-driven. It was a deliberate choice by Florida's leaders to alienate and antagonize one of their most valuable economic contributors. First, the federal government lit the match: tariffs, trade wars, rhetoric about making Canada the 51st state. President Trump raised tariffs to 35%, targeting products from one of America's oldest trading partners. The goal? To look strong, to project dominance. The cost? Billions in economic fallout, starting with air travel between Canada and Florida, which dropped sharply. Then Florida took that match and poured gasoline on it. A hostile welcome. Instead of de-escalating, state-level politicians doubled down with policies that directly attacked the snowbird community. New regulations required Canadian visitors staying more than 30 days to register with U.S. authorities, including background checks and fingerprints, a move that shattered decades of seamless cross-border travel tradition. Senate Bill 2164 restricted foreign ownership of real estate under the guise of national security. Though it didn't specifically name Canadians, the message was clear. You're no longer welcome here. And it worked, just not in the way politicians had hoped. Canadians began selling off Florida properties en masse. Real estate agents from Fort Lauderdale to Sarasota reported record-high listings from Canadians, with one agency saying listings went from 2 or 4 per quarter to as many as 18. And this isn't a temporary protest. This is permanent capital flight. Real people, real consequences. For politicians in Tallahassee, this was an ideological win. They projected toughness, nationalism, and control. But for everyday Floridians, the ones who rely on those snowbird dollars to pay rent, keep their businesses open, or just put food on the table, it's been a nightmare. Local businesses in tourism-heavy cities like Clearwater and Naples are reporting 30 to 50% revenue declines. According to the South Florida Business Journal, some businesses saw revenue collapse by up to 70% in February 2025, the very heart of tourist season. Service workers, waitstaff, bartenders, cleaners, are seeing hours cut, jobs lost, and wages shrink. One doctor at a local clinic shared that he used to see 30-plus Canadian patients a week. Now, less than 10. It doesn't stop at businesses. It goes right to the heart of public finance. The domino effect hits local government. Florida's municipalities rely heavily on property taxes, especially in coastal areas where snowbirds own large portions of real estate. As Canadians sell off, those properties are either sitting empty or plummeting in value. That's $2.1 billion in lost property tax revenue. And when city budgets shrink, so do essential services. Fire departments delay equipment upgrades. Police forces freeze hiring. Schools cut programs. According to a University of Central Florida analysis, unemployment in some coastal counties is projected to jump from 4% to 6%, a devastating blow for the working class. And it's not just Florida that's feeling the shift. Other countries are seizing the opportunity. While Florida burns, competitors are moving fast and smart. Mexico extended tourist stays to 180 days, simplified visa rules, and began promoting affordable private health care. Portugal and Spain, offering safe, affordable, English-friendly communities with better public health access. Caribbean nations, united under the "You Are Welcome Here" campaign, a direct jab at Florida's hostility. These countries aren't just offering better weather, they're offering respect. And that, to a generation of retirees with money to spend and choices to make, makes all the difference. Canadians are now reinvesting the proceeds from Florida property sales into homes in these competitor countries. Florida didn't just lose revenue, it's bleeding long-term capital investment, the kind of money that builds communities, not just fills hotel rooms. Florida politicians have one talking point they keep repeating, but overall tourism numbers are up. They cite a single statistic, that general tourist volume has risen slightly due to more domestic travelers, and use it as a shield. But here's what they don't say. Those domestic tourists spend less. They stay for shorter periods. They don't pay local property taxes, don't maintain seasonal homes, and don't contribute consistently to the community. It's not just apples to oranges, it's apples to crumbs. Florida's economy was designed to thrive off long-term, high-value residents, not quick weekend getaways. Trying to replace snowbirds with road-tripping families from Ohio isn't just unrealistic. It's mathematically impossible. A business model torn apart. Florida didn't lose tourism, it lost trust. That's the real cost here. And trust doesn't show up in spreadsheets. When Canadians decided to sell their homes, skip their usual winter retreats, and invest elsewhere, it wasn't about a dollar amount. It was about feeling unwanted. What once felt like a second home now felt hostile, bureaucratic, and dangerous. Imagine owning a property for 15 years, spending tens of thousands of dollars annually in a community, only to be told you must now submit fingerprints and register as a foreign threat. That's not policy. That's humiliation. And trust, once broken, does not easily return. What's happening now is just the beginning. The real estate market is already buckling under the pressure. In highly seasonal areas, home values are down as much as 30%. Condos once marketed specifically for snowbird rentals now sit empty, a dead investment. Commercial properties are defaulting as small businesses fold. And here's the kicker. When these properties lose value, banks holding mortgages and loans tied to them start to pull back on lending. It's the early signs of a credit squeeze. And for a state like Florida that thrives on development, that's the equivalent of choking off oxygen. A liquidity crisis could be next, where investment slows, projects halt, and jobs disappear across industries. All because politicians wanted to play tough. This isn't just about Florida. This is a case study in economic self-sabotage. It's what happens when leaders prioritize political grandstanding over data, when they chase headlines instead of stability, and when they sacrifice long-term prosperity for short-term applause. We've seen this pattern before, but rarely with consequences this clear. A $6.6 billion market is gone. Thousands of jobs impacted. Entire communities destabilized. Not because of war, not because of the climate, but because of the ego. And the scary part? This story could repeat itself anywhere. Here's the bitter truth. There's no quick fix. Rebuilding trust with foreign investors and long-term seasonal residents takes years, not policy memos or PR campaigns. And even if Florida's leaders backpedal tomorrow, many Canadians have already moved on. They've bought homes in Portugal, in Mexico, in the Dominican Republic. They're not coming back. The Florida brand has been tainted. And the more politicians cling to nationalism and misinformation, the deeper that damage becomes. Florida once had a golden goose, not just in tourism, but in trust, reputation, and global appeal. But that goose was taken for granted. Now, the eggs are gone, and the people holding the knife are pretending they don't know where the blood came from. This isn't just a cautionary tale. It's a flashing red warning for every politician in America. You can't insult your customers, devalue your residents, and weaponize policy, and expect your economy to survive unscathed. Because in the end, ideology doesn't pay the bills. People do. If you found this video eye-opening, there's something else you need to know. This entire collapse? It didn't have to happen. It was warned about, loudly, repeatedly. But politics won.